I wanted a fresh start. My boyfriend, Adam, broke up with me. I was living in New York. He broke up with me and moved across the country to Los Angeles. He was a good guy. It was just one of those going nowhere for 3 years kind of relationships. Like, neither of us had done anything horrible, like have an affair. We liked each other. We just weren't a good fit, which my mother used to tell me on the phone all the time. You guys are both such nice people. Maybe you're just not a good fit. But Adam and I were just passive enough to keep it going. And if things ever got bad, like if one of us might start to muster the courage to pull the plug, then it would be someone's birthday. Or we'd get really great concert tickets. And that would keep the relationship going. I remember in 3 years, Adam never told me he loved me. And I think I loved him, but I wasn't going to say it first, because that's how mature I am. And then one day, Adam took me out to this really nice dinner, and he told me he really cared about me, and he didn't want to marry me. It was a reverse proposal. And we broke up, and that was it. He moved to LA. And I remember it was so painful. I just wanted to forget him and forget even the last 3 years. Just wake up one morning and start fresh. I got my wish. I woke up in an ambulance wearing a cheerleading outfit, which, if you're over 30 and it's not Halloween, just raises questions. And there were EMTs all around me, and I was being placed on a gurney, and then I was being put into a CT scan, and then I was in this hospital room with all these concerned strangers gathered around the bed, but they weren't strangers. I just couldn't identify them. Because what I didn't know is there had been an accident. Earlier that day, I'd been filming a television pilot. It was a movie spoof show, and the pilot was a parody of Bring It On, the cheerleading movie. And the producers, who were horrible, horrible people, strong-armed me into doing a stunt we hadn't planned or rehearsed. I was to be thrown high up in the air and caught. I was thrown high up in the air. I landed on my back and my head. I suffered a massive concussion. I could barely walk, and I had no idea who I was. Diagnosis, amnesia. So I also didn't know that my boyfriend had broken up with me and moved across the country to LA. I didn't know anything. In the hospital, someone put a cell phone up to my ear. They said it was my mother on the phone. I heard this frantic female voice. It meant nothing to me. A friend knew where I lived and took me home, dug the keys out of my purse, put me into bed. I wanted to call my dad. I just had that thought. And my friend said, "Why don't you rest? We can call him later." But I wanted to call my dad, and I needed help because I didn't know the number. And again, my friend just said, "Why don't you sleep for a little while, and then we can call him." And I got so frustrated. He was putting me off, and I didn't understand why. And I said, "I want to call my dad. Why aren't you helping me?" And he looked at me like I was out of my mind. And finally he said, "We just did call your dad. In fact, we've done this 3 times. Every time you hang up the phone, you ask if you can call your dad. So we can call him, but it'll be the 4th time, and I'm just worried we're going to freak him out." This whole conversation, by the way, is happening with me still wearing the cheerleading outfit. Because when the hospital discharges you, it's like prison. They give you the clothes you showed up with, which for me was the costume from the pilot, which is a little white pleated miniskirt and a little navy and white top. I had both short and long-term amnesia. I knew some things, like I knew how to speak and I knew how to read, but I didn't know the big stuff, like who I was. And I also couldn't retain anything. So if someone left the room and came back 10 minutes later, we had to start over. I was living quite literally, moment to moment. A cat walks into the bedroom. What is this cat doing here? Well, they tell me it's my cat. And people came and went, but they were all strangers to me from a past I didn't even know existed. And they tried to help. I remember my best friend Amy stormed into my bedroom screaming, "She's a vegetarian! Don't let her eat any meat!" And it sounded familiar, but it didn't mean anything. I could have been gnawing on a veal shank. It just didn't. But it sounded important, so I didn't want to forget it. There was a pad of Post-it notes and a pen on my bedside table, so I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. I wrote, "You are a vegetarian." Someone had called Adam, and he flew in from LA right away, and he just stayed at my bedside with tears in his eyes. In fact, the first night he slept in my bed with me, which I thought was weird and presumptuous. Like, who is this guy? And he told me he was my boyfriend, but I mean, he could have been the mailman, I don't know. And the next day, he showed me pictures of us together to see if he could jog my memory, or maybe even to make a case for the fact that we were a couple. Apparently, it was a recent trip I had just taken to LA. Adam and Cole at the beach. Adam and Cole in front of Mann's Chinese Theater. Adam and Cole in the Ferris wheel at the Santa Monica Pier. I was in the pictures, but I remembered none of it. I wrote everything down. I was terrified of forgetting. Every piece of information was precious. Anytime someone told me something, or on the rare occasions where something might come back on its own, I wrote it down. You are a vegetarian. We are at war with Iraq. Kristen is your friend who is slutty. One afternoon, I was coming home from physical therapy. I was in a cab going over the Queensboro Bridge, and I noticed the hole in the skyline where the World Trade Center with Twin Towers used to be. That's weird. I wrote it down. Post-it note. Twin Towers gone. Adam was the wonderful boyfriend. This accident was the best thing to ever happen to our relationship. He took care of me, took me to my weekly neurologist appointments and almost daily physical therapy. He gave me my medications and then held me at night when I woke screaming from the nightmares that those medications gave me, or from the sheer disorientation of not knowing who or where I was. A girl from yoga visited. I do yoga? What else do I do? I was on this detective mission to find out who I was. I found journals written in my handwriting in another language. Adam tells me it's Portuguese from when I lived in Brazil. I lived in Brazil? That's so cool. What else do I do? Do I paint? Can I cook? Am I an asshole? What if I'm an asshole? I overheard doctors saying things like, we don't know how long she's going to be like this, and we're not sure if she'll ever fully recover. And they're talking about me. I mean, I'm sitting there in the room while they're having these conversations. The only thing that I could be sure of was this growing pile of Post-it notes on my bedside table. The bigger that pile got, the more of a person I became. But it still wasn't me. It was just information filling an empty space. One afternoon, I was in a cab coming home from physical therapy, going over the Queensboro Bridge, and I started to cry. I didn't know why. I just started crying, and I couldn't stop. And it was right as we were passing the hole in the skyline where the Twin Towers used to be. It was a really chilling, empty space, almost like ghosts of buildings. And I felt flooded. I mean, I wailed, and I didn't understand it. And then it hit me. I was remembering, not a fact or a person, but a feeling. It was the first time since the accident that I felt real. That night, Adam was tucking me into bed. He had just given me my medications, so he was writing on a Post-it note that he had just given me my medications for when in 10 minutes I asked if it was time to take my medication. And I was watching him, the way he was taking care of me, And I was overcome. And I said, I love you. And he said nothing. So I said it again because I had amnesia and I could get away with that. I love you. And again, nothing. And I didn't understand. And then it came back. The breakup and all the pain that went with it, his move to LA, and then a post-9/11 reconciliation. September 11th happened, and we decided we were going to give it one more try. And I went to LA to visit him. And we went to the beach. And we went to Mann's Chinese Theater. And we rode the Ferris wheel, the Santa Monica Pier. But I didn't care about the past anymore because all I knew was this, right now. And here was this man doing everything for me. And if this wasn't love, what was? And why was he even here? And I think the answer is, he's a really, really good person, and he cared about me very, very deeply. But he was a Giuliani boyfriend, good in crisis. And maybe he loved me. Maybe he loved me and couldn't say the words. I'll never know. I think I loved him, but maybe I just wanted to say thank you, and I couldn't tell the difference. It took about 6 months for me to recover. My memory just came back slowly over time. And then I must have been fully healed because a few months after that, Adam and I broke up. Again. Only this time I knew it was coming because we'd done it before. I had wanted this fresh start, and I got it. I mean, I lost everything. I lost myself. But it didn't change reality, and it didn't even change me. I was still the same person. I was even in the same relationship. When I got myself back, I realized nothing had changed. But this time there was something comforting about that, because it meant I finally knew who I was, and it meant I could move forward. It meant even without my memory, I was still me. Thank you.